Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Security Awareness Series, and this is episode 215. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And my co-host for this series is none other than the trusty Ryan McDougall. Ryan, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Just as a quick reminder, I'm the Chief Operating Officer, in case you forgot, Chris, of Social Engineer.
I did.
I'm also the co-trainer of our master's level Social Engineering and our Red Team Labs offerings, which are pretty fun classes. People should check those out. I've taught multiple other classes for multiple years at several public and private events. I've also been in the information technology field for about 26 years, with the last 10 being focused on adversary simulation and security awareness.
I almost did forget who you were, so thanks for reminding me. I appreciate it.
We never see each other.
Yeah, never. I mean, only like 18,000 times a day. Quick sponsor message. This episode is sponsored by Social Engineer. We have a lot of really great things happening in the training world. So if you're interested, we know we get a lot of emails on our classes. And yes, we listened to all of your comments. So we actually have a training schedule up on the website. Finally, I know usually we announce things like a week before they happen, but we have a class coming up. This episode is out in July. So if you're interested, you can join us down in Orlando. And we have a foundational application of social engineering class there. And if you can't make that one, but you're interested, or if you're in Europe, we have another one happening in Bucharest, Romania in September. In addition to that, we'll be announcing something new, something brand new. So you want to watch the website. The first time ever, we're going to open our MLSE class, our master's level social engineering class, to the public. So you can look for information on that. We'll talk about that in further episodes, and it will be on the website. So check out social-engineer.com. We know right around the corner is Security Awareness Month, and a lot of people are looking for information security speakers. We have some really amazing speakers with some great topics all about the human element. So if you want to check out what we have there, you can go to Book a Speaker on the website and check out our awesome speakers and their topics, and you can contact us for more information. If you're an enthusiast about the topic of social engineering and you want to join our Slack channel, you can get the link in the show notes, or you can hit up Ryan or I on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, and we'll get you hooked into there. There's about 1,500 people every day talking about all aspects of SE, from the psychology to actually practitioners who do this for a living and come in for pretext help. We talk about the jobs we do. Of course, we don't mention client names. This is a family-friendly legal channel for those who are interested in social engineering. So if you're interested in that topic and you want to join, you can come on. And we also have a job board in there. I've had 10 people find new employment, which I know is a big thing right now, people looking for work. So we have a lot of companies that are in there. They post jobs. And we also have people who are looking for work who post that they're looking for work. And we've had 10 people make matchups to new companies. So really excited about that too. I want to invite everyone who's listening to take a look at the website, innocentlivesfoundation.org. It's a nonprofit that we work with here at Social Engineer. Really proud of the group over there. 5.5 years now. Actually, we're going to be on 6 years in another month or so. The Innocent Lives Foundation, if you're not familiar with it, is an organization that was started to work closely with law enforcement to help geolocate people who traffic children and who make child abuse material. And for the last 6 years now, we've worked almost 500 cases. Actually, by the time this comes out, it might be at 500 cases. We're not a vigilante group, so we're not out there making believe we're little kids on the internet and trying to find those people. We're actually finding people who've already harmed children or trafficked children and turning them over to law enforcement. And we do that as a nonprofit. So if you want to join the fight, you can do so by going to innocentlivesfoundation.org, and you can volunteer. Or if you want to help us through donations, the nonprofit definitely can use it so we can keep completing our mission. Or if you're a caregiver and you're looking for information on how to keep your kids safe or how to talk to your kids about these things, there's a lot of things on our website. So check out innocentlivesfoundation.org, and you'll find anything you need there on this topic. Last but not least, we want to give a big shout out to our favorite rock and roll band, Clutch. If you really dig the music at the intro and outro of this podcast, it is the best band on the planet Earth, Clutch. So you should definitely give them some love. Go to pro-rock.com, listen to their new stuff on Spotify or anywhere you get music. But the best way to take in Clutch is to go see one of their shows. So you want to do that live because it's just amazing. And you will not be sorry. I guarantee you, you will not be sorry. Something really cool happened. There's a huge fan group for Clutch on Facebook that found out about ILF because Neil and the group there are big supporters of ILF, and they just ran a couple fundraisers for us, auctioning off some really authentic and unique, very old posters, and they raised some serious money for ILF, all because of the love of Clutch. So if that doesn't convince you that they're the best band on earth, I don't know what will. So just go listen to them. Okay, enough of that. Let us talk about our awesome guest that we have today, Jason Rebholz. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at Corvus Insurance. He has over 10 years of experience performing forensic investigations into sophisticated cyber attacks and helping organizations build secure and resilient environments. As Corvus's CISO, Jason leverages his incident response, security, and infrastructure expertise to drive security strategy and reduce the risk of security threats internally at Corvus and for Corvus's policyholders. Prior to joining Corvus, Jason held leadership roles at Mandiant, the Crypsis Group, Gigamon, and MOXFIVE. So a pretty awesome experience there. Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show with Ryan and I today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start off with the question we ask everybody on this episode is, how did you get to where you are? Like, how did you become this? How are you the CISO here at this company now?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting journey. So I was fortunate where in my career, it's just been a series of good timing and opportunities that have popped up and taking full advantage of those. And so it really starts when I was in high school and I was learning to program, and I stumbled into the security aspect of it. I didn't even know what computer security was at that time. I went to school for computer security, which at that time there was no degrees in computer security. But I found one campus, Rochester Institute of Technology, that had a focus on cybersecurity. And the cool thing about it was they also did a bunch with networking and system administration. So it gave me a really just well-founded base to build from. And then as I was applying for positions for my first full-time job, I applied for a position at a company called Mandiant. Didn't know who they were at the time. I didn't even know what incident response was, and applied for a role I definitely wasn't qualified for. But as luck would have it, they just started looking for college hires. So I was one of the very first college hires that Mandiant had. And I thought I was going to be doing pen testing when I showed up. That's what I had applied for. But I showed up the first day and they said, hey, here's a hard drive and tell us what happened on it. And so I started learning forensics. And, for me, it was just about being a sponge. And, when you're in a high talent density company like Mandiant, where you have some of the best minds in incident response, you can't help but learn. You stumble and trip over just knowledge bombs every single day. And so, that was my opportunity to really learn how do these hacks happen? And so I got a lot of experience in investigating nation state threats, China, Russia, Iran, Syria. I did a lot with hacktivists, where if anyone remembers Anonymous and LulzSec back in the day, I did a bunch of these investigations and, saw things on those computers I will never unsee in my life. But I really found a passion for financial crime. Where people would break into brick and mortar stores or e-commerce sites and just try to steal credit card data. And they brought with them a level of sophistication and almost like elegance and art in how they would break into organizations and move around and figure out where this card data was. And so, did that for a really long time. And then followed a series of startups where went over to the Crypsis Group and took over and built out their professional services team. And that's where I really started learning more about cyber insurance and the role that cyber insurance plays for organizations and how they can respond to attacks. And so with Crypsis, I rode the ransomware wave. This was right at the time when ransomware was going from one or two single system infections to enterprise-wide infections. So I remember the day where I got my first ransom demand that was $50,000 and like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I can't believe somebody's asking for $50,000. And now it's like, I wish somebody was just asking for $50,000.
Right. You just pay that and move on with your life.
Exactly. So, learned a lot about how the ransomware ecosystem happens and how they work. Did a lot with business email compromise and how, social engineering leads to financial loss. And then went and did some additional work for companies, just doing business development and things like that, and kind of rounded myself out there until I co-founded a company called MOXFIVE, where they specialized in business recovery. So when a ransomware victim gets hit, it's a lot of work to get them back up and running. It's not just a flip of the switch. And so we would bring in IT experts and coordinate the response and just make sure we can get people up and running as quickly as possible. And all of that led into where I'm at today, where I'm running internal security for Corvus Insurance, which is a cybersecurity insurtech, where we sell cyber insurance policies to help companies respond to these incidents. But the cool thing for me is in this type of role, it's not your typical CISO role where you're just focused on internal security. I run our threat intelligence team to figure out where are these attacks going, what trends are happening. I also run what we call our risk and response team with one of the best people I've ever worked with, Lauren Winchester. And that focus is, how do we protect our policyholders, right? And so, this is the opportunity not only to protect, my company, but also how can we bring more knowledge and more just solutions and just guidance for all of our policyholders so that they don't have to go through their cybersecurity journey alone. And so it's kind of like the culmination of everything I've done in my career to date, where, heavy consulting, but trying to solve security at scale, because for me that's the most important thing. When I was doing incident response, it was one by one, let's solve this issue, and you recognize there are patterns to all of these attacks. And so I said to myself, you know what, there's got to be a better way to try to influence security at scale. And that's where I think cyber insurance comes into play with, just helping educate and mandate certain controls.
So not to date you, but when you got that first hard drive and you were told, hey, tell me what happened, what year was that?
That would have been 2010.
Okay. Because it's interesting. Your path is interesting. Right? You sound a lot like Ryan. Really, it's kind of weird when I listen to you. I'm like, wait, two beards. I'm not sure which one's Ryan. I'm going to start calling Ryan Jason. I don't know. But like your path sounds a lot like Ryan. And in those days, it seems like a lot of us got into where we are today because like like you said, there wasn't schools for this. So somebody handed you something and said, figure it out. Yeah. And if you didn't have a passion for self-education, we would not be sitting here today. Because it sounds like it took you a lot to really just like, you didn't have a background in forensics or whatever. So you're like, okay, I got to figure what out to do next.
Yeah, I mean, if that's not a metaphor for life, I don't know what is.
Right.
This is just about like, it's for me, right? It's problem solving. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what incident response and security is in general, right? You've got a big, meaty problem in front of you. And how do you just break this down into smaller chunks and solve them one at a time? Because otherwise, just like security, like it's going to look like an impossible problem to solve. Yeah. And if you're looking at that in the aggregate, you're not going to even take your first step.
Yeah.
It's the eating the elephant analogy.
Exactly.
So, from your path, do you think that how do you think all these different things that you did, from sysadministration to forensics, how did they help you become a better CISO?
So I fundamentally believe that having a good working knowledge of how networks are built and how systems work together it should be a mandatory foundation for everyone in security. And the reason for that is because are me and Ryan just merging closer together?
I don't even know what to do anymore. Yeah. I mean, you guys, there's like one person on the screen right now. That's all I can see. There's one person.
I don't have to be here. He's saying everything that I'm saying.
This is literally Ryan's like mantra right here.
Great.
Long lost brothers.
Yeah.
Continue. Please preach it.
Yeah. So like for me, right, especially doing forensics, like having that knowledge, it gave me a mental model of how an attacker moves throughout an organization, right? And when you apply this down to security, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is that defenders think in checklists while attackers think in graphs, right? And when you know how these networks are built, and it's literally just knowing what a logical network map looks like, right? I mean, literally, when I look at a hack, that's how I'm picturing it in my mind. And when you can understand that, you're in a much better position to say, hey, if this control fails here, where is an attacker going to go and how can they try to move around? And so you start layering more and more defenses in, right? And I think part of this is just maybe I'm going to open up some wounds here for people, right? But like, this is like the security is not compliance type thing, right? Compliance plays a critical part of or in security, but compliance is not the end all be all of security. That's your checklist, right? But like, you really got to think with how these networks work. How is somebody going to move around in the environment, and how can they take a series of small little minute gaps in your environment and turn that into a full-fledged ransomware attack?
Yeah. I actually, when I was a tester, when I was a penetration tester before I came here, well, I still am a penetration tester, but at my previous company, I used all that system administration knowledge to effectively become the system administrator of the target network. And you start, if you have that background knowledge, you can look around and see how are things configured, where should I go to find the coolest stuff, and you can kind of get in the mind of the system administrator. So I can't agree with you anymore to say that background knowledge is fundamental to both forensics, to testing itself, and for just general security knowledge.
And I think the crazy thing here is, like, I love what you said where like you become the sysadmin, because I always tell my clients, by the end of this, the hacker is going to know more about your environment than you do, right? Because it's like every situation you go into when you're responding to a hack, oh, there's no way that they can access that system. There's no way they can access that data, right? And this from doing pen testing. It's just not the case. Like people, and this is probably one of my biggest pet peeves in security, right? We rely too much on assumptions, and it's those assumptions that add up that allow all of these things to happen. Because I think I fundamentally believe that security isn't hard, but we overcomplicate it because we have so many things that we can do that you forget that, if you just tackle some of the basics, you're going to be able to stop a lot of these attacks that are happening. And let's face it, any hacker is going to be able to get into your environment. It's a one-sided game, but you can at least try to position yourself in the best possible manner so that you're not going to be the lowest hanging fruit, or you're at least going to make it harder for the attacker so it leaves you some time to detect it and respond to it.
Okay, so let me ask you a serious question here, right? Because everything you're saying is great. No. Okay, it was serious before, but I mean, like, this is we're diverging from the planned topic, but I think this is important. So let's say I'm listening to this podcast. I'm not a young guy or gal in college. I already have a career. I'm not a CISO, but I already have a career in InfoSec, but I don't have the background you just said. I don't understand network topology. I'm not a sysadmin. What can I do so I can be better at my job without having to go back to college to get a degree in system administration or something like that?
Yeah, well, I think this is part where security has so many different facets to it, right? And so whenever I hear somebody who says something, hey, like, I'm not technical, right? I can't do security. It's like, well, okay, hold on. Like, there are plenty of things that you can still do in security and are invaluable, right? And so I always go straight to just the GRC world, governance, risk, and compliance, right? That is a very particular type of person. Somebody that is super organized, that does enjoy and lives in checklists and loves to do audits. Like, I've met GRC people before, or just auditors who are like, I live and breathe audit. And I was like, we are on different planets, because that to me is the most boring thing ever, right?
Ever.
But they play a critical role in security, right? And so for somebody who's mid-career, like, I do a lot of mentoring for people in cybersecurity. And, I was chatting with somebody just 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they're like, hey, I'm mid-career. I'm trying to break into cyber. I don't have a technical background, but you know what? I decided to go out and just get a cert, right? And, for them, I think they went the Security Plus route, right? Mm-hmm. And they started networking on their own and in their own company. And then they landed a job on the security team doing GRC. Not a technical person. And in the span, I think that was about 6 months, they've completely transitioned into cyber, right? And so it goes back to what we were saying before, right? Like, don't try to eat the whole elephant, right? This is where it seems really difficult to try to break in, and you put a lot of these self-imposed barriers in place, and all you need to do is find that just like that little alleyway to break in, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice, because it's because we didn't even plan this. So anyone's listening, like, we have a whole nother set of topics we were going to talk about, but this is something Ryan and I talk about all the time, because, there's a lot of people who, friends of mine, I mean, like you, mentor a lot of people, and they've come to me from different industries. I really want to be in your industry. What can I do? And we have our senior team leader here, Patrick Laverty. He's great at like getting some of these people. I had a relative that was asking me questions, and I thought, well, let me not be biased. Let me get Patrick involved in this. And he just said what you said, was like, well, why don't you go start, like, get a Security Plus, get an A plus, get something, get the CompTIA, do something and that will get you started in that direction, right? So having you say that, oh man, just beautiful, because it really does hit the nail on the head that we have, I think last I saw 720,000 positions in InfoSec in America alone that are not filled. And people are asking, how do I get into this? And then they go and they look at these 4 or 5, whatever longer degrees, and they're like, I don't have time for that or money. I'm already an adult. I got kids. What do I do? This is a great, great path. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, you can just take the thing that you love, and there's going to be something in cybersecurity that will accommodate the thing that you love. Like that. I mean, what you're saying is, go down that small little alleyway. That's exactly it. Like, find the thing that you're interested in, and cyber will have something related to it.
Totally. And, it's interesting. You just reminded me, like, early in my career. So, after I found forensics and stumbled into it, I started learning more about reverse engineering. And I was like, I want to do that. And I started doing a bunch of self-study, and I got proficient, right? Like, I was never, I won't even say I was good at it, right? But what was interesting to me is, even though I had a passion for it, I looked over to my right and I was like, that is somebody who can run circles around me in reverse engineering. And I looked at what I was doing with forensics, right? And I said, okay, you know what? I'm really good at forensics and I enjoy doing it, right? And, I started looking more and thinking more about, what is it about it that I like, right? It's a puzzle, right? I love doing, I used to speed solve Rubik's Cubes when I was a kid. I was a big nerd, still am. And like, for me, that was the puzzle. It's pattern recognition. And that applies really well to forensics. And then I reached a point in my career where it's like, you know what? The allure of forensics is starting to wear off, right? Because for me, it was like playing Mad Libs. It was the same story, just changing out the client name, and that was it. And I found myself gravitating more towards the client management of it and just speaking to executives, right? And I mean, this is stuff that helped me get into the CISO role. And so the thing is, like, even you might be super passionate about something and then start doing it. You're like, you know what, maybe this isn't it. But like, you got to just feel okay changing your mind, right? And you're still like, I took everything I learned with that reverse engineering knowledge, applied it back into forensics. And with forensics, applied everything I know and how I look at just strategy today and how I can look at a big meaty problem, break it down. And all of these skills compound off of each other. And so like, I think that's the thing, what happens too for a lot of people is they, one, they get bogged down with not understanding where to start, and then they start planning way too far out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I'm going to be a CISO in 5 years. I never wanted to be a CISO, by the way, right? And so like, but here I am. And so it's just like, sometimes it's good to plan out far in advance, but you also have to pull it back. And you're like, let me at least get the first like step out of the way and maybe plan, 2 or 3 steps ahead, but be flexible. Like, just because you don't like something anymore doesn't mean it's a failure. Like, be nimble and just be able to, recognize you're allowed to change your mind.
I really think you and Ryan should do a 24andMe and see if you're related. Because they're like, just what you said, like, I never wanted to be a CISO. Like, Ryan's like, I never wanted to be a COO. And here he is running an InfoSec company, right? And it's like, this was not his plan. And when he came aboard, he's like, I'm never doing that. Guess what he's doing?
There you go. I'm actually the AI version of Ryan.
Okay, so I mean, we could talk about this topic, and maybe we should have you back and actually talk about this but I do want to get to the topic at hand, because your experience really, I think, could lend some great advice for people who listen to this series of the podcast. So one of the things we like to ask is, like, if you had to pick 2 or 3 things that you would say to a company who's listening to this and saying, okay, wow, I need help. I need to start getting security in line. I need to get my company in line. What are like 2 or 3 tips that you would give to a new CISO listening to this podcast?
There's a few ways you can take this, right? The most common version of this question that I get is around, what are the top 3 controls, right? And, I think, those, I'll just bullet those off real quick, right? It's like, and I think this is step 1 is make sure you have the right tools in your environment, right? Mm-hmm. And when I say the right tools, that doesn't mean all the tools. Right? That means pick the ones that are going to have the biggest return on investment and you can actually run, right? Nice. And so for me, that's EDR, strong endpoint detection and response. That's MFA, all the things. and strong phishing resistant MFA. And then it's backups, right? Making sure you have resilient and secure backups. If I can sneak a fourth in there, it's going to be email security, right? And if you have those four things, you're well positioned, or at least better positioned, to deal with the most common threats, being business email compromise, and phishing emails, and ransomware. From an insurance company perspective, those are the top two things that we see, right? And I think beyond that, it really goes into how do you maximize that return on investment. And so this would be number two, is make sure you're using the tools the way they're intended, and make sure you're actually using them. One of the first mistakes that I made as a CISO was I got a tool and I had a very particular thing in mind that it was going to accomplish. And I accomplished that in the first month, but I had a year subscription for this thing. And I said, damn it. I just wasted some money here, right? And it's one of those things, it's like all the best intentions, but you really got to think through and see, okay, all right, once you get this tool, how are you going to manage this? How are you going to incorporate this into your day-to-day? And this is really about it's ingraining and incorporating the technology that you have into the processes that you're building in tandem. And so that's really, really important. And I would say, the third thing from there, it's really about don't get stuck in the city of no, right? And this is where I think too many security people live. It's my job is to keep the company as secure as possible, full stop, right? And I would amend that to my job is to keep the company as secure as possible while enabling the business. Right. And this is the trap that I think a lot of security engineers get into. And, it's a brutal lesson for CISOs to learn. You have to work with the business, right? That's the job of a CISO. And so you're constantly looking at things from the angle of not how can I eliminate risk, but how can I reduce that risk down to an acceptable level for the company. And that is probably the hardest thing for super hardcore technical people to kind of shift into. But if you don't get that right, you will not be a successful CISO. Or you won't even be a successful security engineer.
I love it all. I have a couple. I want to clarify some things because I can almost hear some of the audience asking questions. Right. I love the one that you said in your first tip about having good MFA. Right, like you said, good MFA, and you emphasize that. So, what's bad MFA?
So, I would say it's anything that's not FIDO2 compliant. Now, the way that I look at this is, we'll start at the bottom, right? SMS, and it's what year is it? We're in 2020 talking about SMS, but here we are, right? If there was no other alternative for MFA, use SMS. And I look to a lot of the major banks out there that still only support SMS authentication. Like, shame on you.
Scares me.
But I'm still going to use it if it's the only thing I've got, right?
Yeah.
So that's that's the forgotten stepchild of MFA, right? We'll use it if we remember it or we need it, but let's keep it to the side for now. The OK is going to be your app-based authenticators, right? So these are typically going to be ones where you get the rotating one-time password. This is what the majority of people are using because it's what's most widely supported. I'll file this under good with air quotes, right? It's good to the point until threat actors start bypassing it. And unfortunately, threat actors are bypassing this now. We haven't reached a critical mass yet where it's happening every single day, but we're getting pretty close where it's, the toolkits are out there to bypass these things. You look at the Lapsus group where they're hacking into Okta, Microsoft, all of these big name companies by just prompt bombing, where they're just constantly logging in after they steal their credentials and annoying a user until they click accept. That's a problem, right? Yeah. You can certainly alleviate that with training, but it's still a fundamental flaw with just how that's set up. And so when we're talking about FIDO2 compliant, it's a lot of people just think back to the little dongles, like the YubiKeys and stuff that you would carry around. And that certainly is the industry standard. But a lot of these things are getting built into laptops now, right? Just with your MacBook, just use your fingerprint scanner. With your phone, you've got that fingerprint scanner tied in there. You have Google, who's releasing things like passkeys now to help support all these things. So for me, it's phishing resistant is the key there. And that's when you're looking for the FIDO 2 compliance there.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. And then the fourth one you said was backups. Now, honestly, I can't tell you how many times we sit in front of clients and this is like our mantra. Like, do you have backups? Like, oh yeah, we did one like 6 months ago. It's like on a tape from like 1999 sitting in the server room, right? So let's expound on that like you did MFA. What is a good backup plan and policy so that way companies could, let's just say I get hit by ransomware. What do I do now? Like how's my backup policy save me?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you the story from ransomware recovery that happened 95% of the time. You go in there and you ask the question, all right, do you have backups? Yep. Okay. Are those backups viable? We're still trying to figure that out, right? It's like, if you can't figure that out in 5 minutes, then something's probably wrong. Yeah. But I think we're in the midst of an evolution in what we mean by backups, right? And so 5 years ago, backups meant, well, we've got a hot site that we can swap everything over to with a flip of a switch. Great. Like, you have now positioned the environment to be redundant. And if there is a natural disaster, you're going to be continuing your business operations. Great. You get an A+. And the problem is that works really well for ransomware actors, because if it's directly connected, when they deploy that ransomware, it hits all your backups as well. Yeah. And so, kind of the new modern age version of backups is really following, the 3-2-1 rules. And I always add in 3-2-1-1, making sure that you're validating. So, 3 is going to be how many copies do you have, 2 different mediums, 1 backup that's air gapped. And then 1 is that you're validating all of these backups ongoing, right? And so that is going to help from a position of, do we have redundancy in our backups so that if our primary backup solutions fail, we still have something to go back to? And with that, you also need to make sure you're adding in the security aspect of this, because what I always see too is you're going to have the grade A student who's following these redundant backups. They're testing them all the time, but they haven't joined to a Windows domain. And so when a hacker breaks into an environment and gets the domain admin, the keys to the kingdom, they just go and they're like, all right, well, we're just going to log into the backup server now because we can, and we're just going to delete all your backups, right? And so what was the point, right? If you have your other backups air gapped, then great, right? You can still get back up and running. It might take a little bit longer. So, I really see this modern day age of backups is, you've got the redundancy, you've got the security, and you can have this seamlessly interact so that, you with a flip of a switch, you can restore something, or worst case scenario, you're downloading something or restoring from a tape and getting it back up and running within 24 hours. But it's got to be customized to your environment, because my backup plan is and should be different than yours, because I just have different business requirements. So you got to understand what those are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, numerous times in these answers, you brought up that things need to be phishing resilient. Okay, so obviously, as a company that does this, I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. This situation has happened a million times to us, right? So CISO sitting in a meeting with his team, and he says, "Hey, we don't have a phishing service going on here. Joe, go find us a phishing service." Now, Joe's like, phishing service? And he's like, "Yep, something that's going to phish us." So Joe goes to Google and he types in phishing services, and he gets hit by 12 million SaaSes that just have like one button you can click and send magical phishing emails. One of the topics you brought up before is having realistic phishing simulations. So how, as a CISO, would you instruct Joe then to go find something that's going to be a quality, that's going to be a realistic phishing simulation that will be good for a company to use?
Yeah, so I think it first starts with understanding what are the real attacks that are happening out there, and then 2, like, what are you worried about, right? And so, literally this week, I was talking to somebody in our company, and they came up to me and said, "You know what? I got a bone to pick with you." I was like, "Oh, okay, here we go. what do we got?" He's like, "Before you started as a CISO, I never fell for one of our phishing simulations. And the first one I failed was the first one that you did." And I was like, "I'm glad to hear that."
Yeah.
Because what I found was, and this is not a knock on anyone, right? But this is the standard thing. When we're doing phishing simulations, we make it too easy, where it's like, it's so obvious that it's a phishing email that it's just like anyone is going to be able to detect that.
Yeah.
And you're certainly going to have those, right? The Nigerian print scams and stuff like that. It's like, it's going to be out there, right? But at the same time, most of those things are probably going to get picked up by your email security solutions.
Yeah.
So why would I train towards the things that are most likely to get picked up by my email security solutions? I want to train my users for the things that I think are going to get past that. Right. And so that's why, like, when I'm doing phishing simulations, I'm going like to the top degree on difficulty. Right. One of my favorites is things like sharing Google documents. Right. So difficult to pick up, and you have to pay attention. Right. And so for me, that's the real world, right? Like, that's what the majority of hackers who are looking to break into your organization and steal money or deploy ransomware, that's what they're using. So that's what I'm going to go do and train towards, because like, I'm not looking to train, the sixth grade basketball team here, right? Like, we need to train people to deal with the threats that we're facing. So we got to be playing at a varsity, level, a semi-professional level. And it sounds scary, but it's not that hard, right? It's just like, we just got to get over and say, you know what, we're going to up this difficulty, and it's okay if you fail. That's okay. Like, I don't care that my numbers on the click rate jumped 20% when I started doing this. I'm happy, because that gives me the realistic answer to how susceptible we are. And now that we have that baseline, now we can start doing more targeted training and give more realistic information on, what the threats are, and start driving that down to get to where we were before.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with it, because I was going to lead into, a lot of times companies are afraid to up the difficulty level because employees then get punitive measures for failing, right? We've worked with companies that literally would fire people for failing security assessments. And you're like, whoa, really? Like, no, hang time out. You can't, like, no one's going to want your company to be secure if they're worried about getting fired, right? They're just going to do nothing. You paralyze them with fear. So I love what you said, that they have to feel like, okay, you failed. Now let's just educate you. We're not going to punish you. We're not going to humiliate you. We're not going to embarrass you. Let's train you.
Exactly. Well, because that's the holistic security program, right? Like, the things that annoy me to no end with security is when we blame the victims and they're like, well, the user should have known better. Well, maybe we should have built more resilient systems, right? Like, if I'm in an environment, or if I'm talking to somebody that they're like, all we're doing is phishing awareness. Well, like, when you say all, what do you mean? Like, no, that's like, everything we're doing is about training the users. Like, okay, like, that is a very, very important part of your security program. Like, fundamental, absolutely fundamental. But in the same sentence, we also say that humans are the weakest part of security.
Right.
So I also need to plan for when that fails. And that's where I bring in the technology and other parts of my security program. And this is the fundamentals of defense in depth. But like, I have to plan for that to fail. And when I have a user that clicks on a link, whether it's a phishing simulation or a real one, how did that get through my email filters, right? What are we not doing in training that, led to the increase of likelihood of this happening? And how can I protect after they click on that link? Like, that's what's happening. And so every opportunity that you have with an employee that might make a mistake there is like, what can we learn from this? And like, I got into a heated argument once with somebody where like, we should have KPIs for security for our users. And I'm like, that's not their job. Like, they got like, I don't want a KPI for, some other unit that, even if I can somewhat influence it, like, we have to recognize that we are specialists in each of our fields. And so like, I'm going to do what I can to educate my users, but like, I'm not going to place the full burden on them either. Right. It's just not fair. So, and it's not realistic.
Yeah. We focus on reporting ratio. right? So yeah, click ratio may go up and down every month.
I love that.
What we talk to our clients is, look, you see your click ratio go up, but where's your reporting ratio? Well, if that's going up, then guess what? The program's working.
Exactly.
Because the education is sticking, right? Click ratio is, who cares about that? Please, let's do it. Because we preach it because that to me is the metrics that what you're doing is actually successful. Right. And we tell our clients, it's kind of like going to the gym. If you could curl 20 pounds and you stay at 20 pounds for the rest of your life, you're not doing it right. Right. You should see an increase in the weight, or the weight should get easier because you're doing it right. So if your employees are reporting more, and you're increasing the difficulty in reporting is still going up, you're doing it right. Right.
Well, and your gym analogy, like it reminded me of something I always say as well. It's like, security is not going to the gym once a year, right? It's like you're doing 50 push-ups a day, you're going to see the results. You don't go to the gym once a year and, lift a couple weights and call yourself healthy, right? Like it's the same thing with phishing. And so like I fundamentally hate the idea of annual security training, but like, we have to do it because it's the good thing to do. But it's like, that's not enough. Right. Yeah. And, just like when we sell cyber insurance policies, right? Like we have a whole dedicated team focused on what happens between when your insurance policy becomes active and the full year after that, because a lot in security changes in a year. So why do we always revert back to annual security training? I'm guilty of this too, right? It's like, because it's more work, right? And it's like, sometimes maybe the results aren't like as clear, but when you start measuring things like that, that's something, right? And, that's why like, phishing simulations, like I like that should never be once a year. Like you should be doing that more and more. Because like, that's the stuff that matters. Like that's where people are really going to learn, not from like some stupid animated video of like Sally Susie or whatever, who's like jumping through the forest with security tidbits. Like that just doesn't really work all that much.
I've seen that one, by the way. No. So I feel like we could just talk forever because we are like three peas in a pod here, except, just you guys are the same person, but I'm seeing the time. So let me ask you a couple questions. Most of us, all of us here, actually everyone in this room, we're not sitting here without some really great people that have mentored us or helped us to get to where we are today. So who would you say are your greatest mentors that helped you get to where you're sitting right here today?
So his name is Steve Serdu. I met him at Mandiant. If anyone wants to know why Mandiant was successful, it's Steve Serdu. That man can run a professional services unit like none other. And he just taught me the importance of detail. And, when you would submit a report to him, you basically would go in there and just like, okay, here we go. Because you knew it was going to come back with a lot of red lines, right? Yeah. But every one of those marks in that report made you think and just, made you understand the importance of those things. And so I would not be where I am today without having met him and just being fortunate that he saw something in me and invested the time to help me grow as a person, as a professional. And he's still to this day the first person I call when I've got a question on something.
That's awesome. Thank you. We're going to have a conversation with him because that's great. I love hearing like all of us have somebody or more than one that it like when you ask that question, you go, "Web right away. I know exactly why I'm here." Right? There's no reason I'd be sitting here if it wasn't for that person. That's kind of cool. Our listeners for 13 years now, or since 2009, I ask this question every podcast, and our listeners love to read. And if you have a favorite book or books, it doesn't have to be about the topic we just spoke about. It could just be anything. I mean, we've got. Well, I had a guest once that gave like a horror book out as their favorite book. Like it's like, so whatever. We love to read. What is your favorite books that you would recommend for people to take a look at?
So I've got a dirty secret that I hate security books. So I'm glad you said it doesn't have to be related to security.
It does not have to be security.
So yeah, I don't read security books because mainly I think I can get that information elsewhere. And so the books that I gravitate towards are more leadership, more self-improvement, things of that nature. And so there's one book in particular that is my absolute favorite, and it's Atomic Habits. And the reason I like that is because it talks about a lot of things that apply not only in your personal life, but also your professional life. And it's just like, how do you build the right systems to succeed? Because you fall to the level of your system, and that's the important thing, right? And so tie this back to security. If I want to build a successful security program, I better have the right systems in place to run that security program and be successful, because otherwise it's not going to work. So that is by far like my favorite book. And the only other thing I would say for CISOs in particular, and really anyone in their career, I love books on storytelling, because I think the better you can communicate, the more successful you will be. If that's what you want. There are some people who want to just go hardcore down, like heads down tech, and like all the power to you. But if you're looking to go the management track or just more business, your ability to succeed is going to come down to your ability to communicate.
I love that. I have a really good friend that she runs a company based on teaching people how to do better storytelling.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And she's on the board of ILF, and she's wonderful. And when she talks about something that she's passionate about, it is like listening to the best. Like I could just curl up at a fire at her feet and listen to her talk about the most boring topic on earth. But she tells it and it's like, whoa, I'm excited now about this topic I didn't even care about 5 minutes ago. It's the power of doing that. Yeah, it really does. Jason, honestly, I think we could probably sit here for hours and talk to you about this stuff. Fascinating. I think we should, in the future, have another podcast to talk about getting into the industry, because this is a topic that here at Social Engineering, we're very passionate about. We're big into education and teaching. And we happen to hire a lot of people that aren't in the industry and bring them into the industry. So the tips and things you gave today they're just phenomenal. Really, really wonderful. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Yeah,
well, I appreciate you having me. Enjoyed meeting my new brother, Ryan, and we definitely have to do this again.
We'll meet in real life one day. Share stories.
That would be great. Actually, I don't know if the universe can handle that. They'd be like, wait, I thought the universe, the multiverse is now together. No. Well, everyone, thanks for listening and joining us today. And next month, we'll be joined by another cybersecurity professional on the Security Awareness series. So we look forward to seeing what we learned next month. Until then, stay safe and secure. See you.